Hello, everyone. Welcome back. And thanks for joining us today. We have a brand new story to share with you. So let's get started. I never thought my quiet, predictable life would be disrupted by a dinner invitation. At 54, I had settled into a rhythm that was, by all appearances, peaceful. My husband Paul and I had been married for 27 years. We'd raised 2 children, now grown and living their own lives. Our home was filled with silence, save for the soft hum of the dishwasher or the occasional clinking of teacups in the evening. Paul was a kind man, steady, devoted, and utterly predictable. We didn't fight, we didn't shout. We just existed together, side by side, day by day. I never questioned it. Until the night Ethan called. Ethan had been Paul's friend for over a decade, a successful real estate broker with an easy smile and a voice that could melt tension like butter on warm toast. He had recently started dating a woman named Lena, young and vibrant, the kind of woman who filled a room with laughter. So when Ethan invited us over for dinner, I assumed it would be like any other evening. Polite conversation, wine, dessert, home by 9. I even wore my usual soft blue sweater and flats. Comfortable, forgettable. But something about the way Ethan looked at me when he opened the door made my breath catch. It wasn't just a greeting. It was something else. A pause that lingered too long. A smile that softened at the corners. I told myself I was imagining things. I had to be. As we sat down to eat, I noticed Ethan's attention drift toward me more than once. Subtle, but unmistakable. He asked me questions that Paul hadn't in years, about my hobbies, my thoughts on a book he'd read, whether I'd ever considered writing one myself. I felt seen in a way I hadn't realized I was missing. After dinner, as Paul and Lena chatted by the fire, Ethan joined me in the kitchen to help with the dishes. His hand brushed mine as he handed me a plate, and something passed between us, silent, electric. I pulled back quickly, heart racing. He looked at me for a moment, as if deciding whether to speak, but then said only, "You have a beautiful way of disappearing into the background. It's a shame." That night, lying beside Paul in bed, I couldn't sleep. Ethan's words echoed in my mind like a secret I hadn't meant to hear. And for the first time in a very long time, I began to wonder, had I disappeared without even knowing it? The morning after that dinner, I stood in the kitchen staring at my reflection in the window, coffee cooling in my hands. Outside, the garden I'd nurtured for years swayed gently in the breeze, its order and beauty a reflection of the life I'd built. But inside me, something felt out of place, like a picture frame slightly tilted on the wall. Ethan's words from the night before played on a loop in my mind. You have a beautiful way of disappearing into the background. Was that what I had become? A silent backdrop to everyone else's lives. Paul came downstairs in his usual way, slippers shuffling, glasses perched on his nose, mumbling about the news. He kissed my cheek absently, thanked me for the coffee, and turned on the morning news. Routine, unchanging, comforting, yes, but suddenly it felt suffocating. Later that day, Ethan texted me, a simple message. "Thanks again for last night." I meant what I said. I stared at my phone, unsure of how to respond. A part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part, a part I hadn't heard from in years, ached to reply. I finally typed, "I'm not sure what you meant." He responded almost immediately, "I think you do. But we can pretend, if that's easier." I didn't reply. Instead, I went about my day, but I found myself distracted, floating through tasks. When Paul asked me what I was making for dinner, I realized I hadn't even thought about it. Something that hadn't happened in years. That evening, as we ate in silence, I watched him across the table. The familiar lines of his face, the quiet steadiness in his movements. He didn't notice that I was elsewhere. The next day, Ethan called. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was warm, hesitant. "I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable. That wasn't my intention. But I meant what I said. I see you, Claire. I always have." Claire, my name, spoken with such quiet reverence, stirred something deep in me. It wasn't just about Ethan. It was about me, about the woman I'd stopped seeing in the mirror, the one who used to dream, feel, and want more. I didn't know what this was turning into, but something had been awakened, and I wasn't sure I could push it back into the quiet again. Days passed, but the weight of Ethan's words lingered like a faint scent on my skin, present, persistent, impossible to ignore. I busied myself with everything I could think of: gardening, cleaning closets I hadn't opened in years, baking pies I didn't even want to eat. But nothing could drown out the hum in my chest whenever his name lit up my phone. I didn't answer his calls, but I didn't block him either. I wasn't ready to close that door. Not yet. One Thursday afternoon, while Paul was at his usual chess night, I found myself sitting in my car outside the small bookstore where Ethan worked part-time. I had no plan, only the dull ache of curiosity and confusion gnawing at me. Before I could talk myself out of it, I walked in. He looked up from behind the counter, and for a moment, everything stilled. His eyes met mine with that same knowing softness, and my breath caught. "Claire," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think you'd come." "I didn't think I would either," I replied honestly. He motioned toward a quiet reading nook in the back, and I followed. We sat across from each other, surrounded by shelves of forgotten stories, as if tucked inside a secret world. "Why did you say that? That you see me?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Ethan leaned forward, his gaze never leaving mine. "Because it's true. Every time I've come to your house, I've seen how you light up a room quietly, how you make everyone else feel at ease. But no one ever asks how you feel, not even Paul." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. I hated how deeply those words sank. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that Paul loved me, that I was happy, but the truth clung bitterly to the back of my throat. "I'm not trying to come between you and your husband," Ethan added, "but I can't pretend anymore. I think about you, Claire, more than I should." For a heartbeat too long, I didn't speak. The air between us pulsed with tension, equal parts fear and temptation. Then I whispered, "I think about you too." The moment hung there, trembling on the edge of something I didn't know how to define. I had crossed a line, not with a kiss, not with a touch, but with a truth I could no longer deny. After that moment in the bookstore, something inside me shifted, subtle yet seismic. I returned home that evening to Paul's familiar hum in the kitchen, the clinking of silverware, the low murmur of the TV in the background. Everything was exactly the same, and yet I was not. I went through the motions, smiled at his jokes, asked about his day, sat beside him during dinner, but my mind was elsewhere, not because I wanted it to be, but because it refused to let go of what had just begun. Ethan and I hadn't kissed. We hadn't touched, but a door had opened, and behind it was a flood I wasn't prepared for. 2 days later, I received a text from him. I'm sorry if I made things harder. If you want me to back off, I will. I stared at the message, heart pounding. For a moment, I hovered over my keyboard, fingers trembling. Then I typed, "Can we talk?" "Just talk." He replied almost immediately, "Tonight?" That evening, I told Paul I was meeting a friend for coffee. It wasn't a lie, not entirely. I met Ethan at a quiet cafe near the riverfront, neutral, public, safe. At least that's what I told myself. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table in the corner, 2 cups of tea already steeping. When I sat down, we both just stared at each other for a moment, as if unsure of what came next. The silence wasn't awkward. It was electric. "I've never done this before," I admitted softly. "I don't know what I'm doing." "Me neither," he said, "but I know what I feel when I see you, and I don't want to pretend anymore." I swallowed hard, tears unexpectedly brimming. I love my husband. I've built my whole life with him. "I know," Ethan said gently, "and I'm not asking you to destroy that. I want to know you." The you behind the polite smile. The woman who's still dreaming, but hasn't said it aloud in years. And before I could stop it, the tears slipped down my cheeks, because he saw me, and that terrified me more than anything else. I should have walked away. But instead, I stayed. And with every second that passed, I felt myself slipping further into a place I both feared and longed to explore. After that night at the cafe, everything changed. Even though nothing had technically happened, there was no kiss, no illicit touch, just words, just the aching kind of honesty that exposes the cracks you've been too scared to see. I returned home to find Paul asleep on the couch, the soft flicker of the TV dancing across his face. I stood there for a long moment, watching him, feeling the deep weight of guilt settle across my shoulders like a wool blanket in July, too warm, too heavy, suffocating. In the days that followed, Ethan and I maintained a delicate silence. No texts, no meetings, but the silence itself pulsed between us like a heartbeat. I avoided the bookstore. I filled my days with errands, gardening, calls to my sister, anything to avoid the gnawing feeling in my chest. But the distance didn't bring clarity. It brought longing, a quiet, relentless ache that made me question the woman I thought I was. Then one afternoon, as I was walking through the farmer's market, I saw him, Ethan, standing at a flower stall, staring at a bundle of white tulips, my favorite. Our eyes met across the crowd. He didn't smile, neither did I. But something passed between us, a recognition, a calling. He approached slowly, cautiously. "I wasn't sure if I'd see you again," he said. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just stared at the tulips in his hand. "I still mean what I said," he continued. "I don't want to make this harder for you, but I also can't pretend that I don't feel something real when I look at you." "I don't know what I feel," I whispered, barely audible over the chatter around us, "and I can't afford to find out. If I do, I might not come back." He nodded, eyes soft, heart in his throat. "Then maybe don't come back to the same place. Maybe come back to something new." It was madness, and yet it made an eerie kind of sense. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, wind in my hair, heart in free fall, but still rooted to the ground by a thread of loyalty, of fear. I turned and walked away, but my heart didn't follow, and I had no idea how much longer I could survive the pull in 2 directions without tearing myself apart. The days after that chance encounter at the market blurred together in a haze of conflicted emotions. I couldn't stop thinking about Ethan, his voice, his eyes, the way he had held those tulips like they meant something more than just flowers. And yet, every night I returned to Paul, to the same dinner table, the same conversations, the same quiet comfort of a life we'd built over decades. But now, that comfort felt more like a cage. I tried to be present, to listen as he talked about work, the neighbor's new car, a leak in the attic. I nodded. I smiled. But inside, I was screaming. One evening, as we sat together, watching reruns of a show we'd seen 100 times, Paul reached for my hand. It should have felt familiar, reassuring. Instead, it startled me. I flinched, just enough for him to notice. He turned to me slowly, brow furrowed. "Are you okay, Julia?" The question hit me like a blow. Simple, director, loaded. "I'm just tired," I replied, too quickly forcing a smile. "It's nothing." But Paul didn't let it go. "You've been distant for weeks now. I thought maybe it was stress or that you needed space, but it's more than that, isn't it?" I stared at the TV, heart pounding, words stuck in my throat. A storm was rising inside me, building with every unspoken truth. I could feel it, teetering on the edge. "I ran into Ethan at the market," I said quietly, almost hoping he wouldn't hear me. He did. The name landed in the room like a dropped glass. Paul's posture stiffened. "Ethan from the bookstore." I nodded slowly. "We talked, just briefly, but there's something, Paul. I don't know what it is. I don't even know what I feel, but I've been trying to push it away, and it's not working." His silence was deafening. He stared at me, and I saw it. Hurt, confusion, disbelief, but also something deeper, fear. "So what are you saying?" he asked, his voice low. "Do you want to leave?" "I don't want to leave," I whispered. "I just want to feel alive again." The words hung in the air like smoke. Paul didn't answer. He simply stood up and walked out of the room. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Whatever came next, nothing would ever be the same again. The silence between Paul and me became a quiet war in the days that followed. We went through the motions, breakfast, chores, shared space, but there were no more questions, no more gentle touches, only a fragile stillness, like we were both afraid to speak the truth aloud, afraid it would shatter everything we'd built. I wanted to talk. I wanted him to scream, to cry, to say something that would tell me he still felt anything for me. But instead, he withdrew further into himself. The man who once knew how to read me with a single glance now couldn't meet my eyes. I found myself walking to the bookstore without meaning to. My hands trembled as I reached for the doorknob, the bell above, chiming like a confession. Ethan looked up from behind the counter, his expression softening the moment he saw me. He didn't smile. He just looked, like he knew. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said quietly. "I didn't know I would," I replied, my voice barely audible. He stepped around the counter, careful, respectful, like approaching a bird that might fly away at the slightest sound. "You don't have to say anything, Julia. I wanted you to know I'm still here, whatever you decide." There it was, that word again, decide. Like it was so simple, but it wasn't. I wasn't choosing between two men. I was choosing between two versions of myself. The one who had spent 20 years being what everyone needed, dependable, composed, loving, and the one who had recently awakened, gasping for air, desperate to feel something more than just safe. "I'm scared," I admitted, staring at the floor. "I don't know how to do this. I don't even know who I am anymore. Ethan's voice was steady, grounding. You don't have to know. You just have to want to find out. For a moment, I let myself imagine it. A life with no guilt, no pretending, no numbness, just truth. But with that vision came pain too. Paul, his silence, his hurt. I didn't stay long. I thanked Ethan, promised nothing, and left. But as I walked home, the air felt heavier than ever, like the sky itself was waiting for my next move. And somewhere, deep inside me, I knew the time for waiting was almost over. The decision I'd been avoiding finally came crashing into me the following evening. Paul was sitting on the porch, nursing a glass of bourbon, staring out at nothing in particular. The air between us was thick with everything we hadn't said. I stood in the doorway for a long moment watching him. This man, who had once made me laugh so easily, who knew how I took my coffee without asking. And yet now there was a chasm between us that neither of us seemed willing or able to cross. I need to talk to you, I said softly, stepping out onto the porch. He didn't look at me. I figured. I sat beside him, the wooden slats creaking beneath my weight. For a long moment, we said nothing. Then, with a breath that felt like it came from somewhere deep and ancient inside me, I spoke. There's someone else. His head turned slowly. No fury, no shouting, just quiet devastation in his eyes. Ethan, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. He nodded, taking another sip of bourbon. Did you sleep with him? No, I whispered. But I thought about it. I still do. That was worse somehow. His shoulders slumped, and the strength I always saw in him seemed to drain away. I always thought if we ever fell apart, it would be because of something big, not because you started needing something I couldn't give. My heart cracked. It's not that simple. I know, he said, but it hurts all the same. The porch light flickered, casting long shadows across the yard. We sat in silence, broken and exposed, the truth finally uncoiling between us like smoke. I didn't know what I wanted him to say. Beg me to stay, let me go, offer forgiveness. Instead, he said, So what now, Julia? I need time, not to be with Ethan, not yet. I need time to find me again, because somewhere along the way, I think I lost her. He nodded slowly. I think I lost you too. Tears welled in my eyes. I never stopped loving you, Paul. I just stopped feeling alive. That night, I didn't sleep. Neither did he. But when the sun rose, it felt different, less like an ending, and more like the edge of something uncertain, something honest, and maybe, for the first time in a long time, something real. Life doesn't always fall apart in loud, dramatic ways. Sometimes it unravels in quiet conversations, on front porches, in stolen glances, and in the aching silence between two people who once knew each other completely. What happened between Paul and me wasn't about betrayal in the traditional sense. It was about the silent erosion of connection and the painful realization that love alone isn't always enough. But there's a lesson in that, a reminder that self-reflection, honesty, and emotional courage are necessary not only to preserve a relationship, but sometimes to let it go with grace. Whether I end up rebuilding something new with Paul or stepping into something uncertain with Ethan, the most important journey is the one I've begun within myself. Thank you for listening to this deeply personal chapter of my life. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever faced a moment of emotional crossroads or had to make an impossible choice, please share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters. Don't forget to like the video, and if you'd like to follow the next parts of this story and more like it, be sure to subscribe to the Heartfelt Tales Reddit YouTube channel. We're just getting started.